Our next panel is ready to go, and I would like to invite on stage moderator, Dr. Renata Thiébaut. And the topic we will discuss is the green energy revolution and why we need Asia. So welcome to the stage, Renata.
Hello everyone. Today I have here some of my colleagues from Mitsubishi and also from different companies like Enpal, and they are going to share different perspectives and their viewpoints on the green energy revolution. So it's important for them to share a little bit from the background, the work that they are doing, especially in different parts of Asia. So we are going to have their different point of views and perspectives of the green energy revolution in Sri Lanka, in Pakistan, also here in Europe, and in China as well. So please come and join me.
Just an advice to hold the microphone closer to your mouth.
Please have a seat. So Lucas, let's start. We had a talk already about the work of Enpal and also what you are doing in terms of supply chain in China. So maybe you can go through your presentation and also share with us a little bit about what you have done and the challenge that you have faced also during the pandemic times with the COVID.
Yes, happy to. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm happy to quickly walk through some very few slides I prepared. I won't bore you. 1 second on Enpal. What are we doing? Well, first of all, no surprise, our world is burning. We need to fix it. And we want to achieve that by basically connecting humanity into the biggest renewable energy community on Earth. In figures, that means that we want to connect 10 million homes by 2030 into the renewable energy community. And how do we do that? We install entire renewable energy systems in single-family homes. Well, we started out as a PV installer. Right now, we are the biggest PV installer in the residential segment in Germany. But we moved into many other, very close areas as well, as we integrated a storage solution, for example, an EV charger, and we also launched a heat pump earlier this year into our entire product offering. And now to the slide before, what we mean with connecting all of those households into a renewable energy community, we are basically creating a virtual power plant by connecting all our existing clients into one big community and allowing them to trade energy within the system, so they save money and also they increase the utilization of renewable energy instead of using energy from the grid. Well, how we offer this in one sentence, it's a no-brainer solution for end customers. So it's a 20-year no-risk kind of offering where we are providing everything from installation services to maintenance, support, and financing. So you as a customer just pay a monthly fee, and that's basically it. Well, why are we here today? Well, no, we need to raise some money, but that's just not so important. How can I? It's not working anymore. No. The PV industry is booming, and we need to transition the entire energy system across the globe at the same time. And we can only achieve that on a global scale by working together. And if you take a look at those numbers, you can see that Europe just is a very tiny part of basically this bar. And there are many drivers for growth and acceleration currently taking place, right? So PV being one of the most important parts for China's latest 5-year plan, the IRA heavily subsidizing local production in the US, India basically launching something very similar with the PLI scheme, and also geopolitical tensions across the globe now pushing Europe towards a more healthy diversification. When it comes to supply chains, and I just wanted to bring one slide, and that's basically everything you need to tell in order to see the dependency between Asia and Europe. It is impossible to achieve the renewable energy transition without a close collaboration with Asia because of this. If you take a look at the value, this is the value chain for PV modules in the reverse order, but basically all the yellow bars are China. Yeah? So in wafer production, the dependency on China is 97%. And you see the orange chart, which is 21 for modules and 16.5 for cells. And this is mostly Southeast Asia and India. And the rest, like US and Europe, basically is not even there on the chart. So, and there is no significant capacity ramp up currently happening in Europe. There's no response in Europe to the IRA. But you see the demand on the slide right next to it in Europe, which will basically explode. So the only way in order to achieve the renewable energy transition across the globe and also here in Europe will be collaboration with Asia, especially in the next couple of years. And that's the only message I wanted to bring today.
Well, thanks for sharing. Also, Lukas, I would like to know a little bit more about the challenge that you faced during the pandemic times, especially in China. So how did you manage your supply chain and your team back in China and other countries in Asia as well? Could you share a little bit about your challenge and perhaps the opportunities that you faced at that time as well?
Yes, of course. We made a very counterintuitive move back then in March 2020. We opened the China office, and any investor on our cap table, which you saw earlier, said that we are stupid and that we should do everything else but not opening up an office in Asia. Well, this saved our life because we were the only PV installer in Germany who never had any supply chain issues during the entire pandemic, because we basically switched the game by buying from the biggest manufacturers on earth directly and basically cutting out any wholesalers in between. This helped us to manage the supply chain closely. We were literally going with any container directly from the production line to the harbor, making sure it gets shipped. Actually, one of our containers was on Evergreen in the Suez Canal, but anyways, we kind of were lucky enough to manage this the pandemic quite well, but it was more a kind of luck move than anything else, I would say.
All right. So among all the challenges, right, you decided to take the risk, and also you saw some opportunities out there. I believe that now things are much better back in China, right, and in Asia.
Yes, I think now it's more or less back to normal, I would say, as normal as it gets, at least.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to know a little bit more about Mitsubishi. Right. So what are the main projects, especially here in Europe, that you can see that everybody's talking about energy transaction, right? Could you share a little bit more about the work that you are doing?
Yeah, that's a pleasure to me. Thank you very much. So my name is Andreas Wagner. I'm representing Mitsubishi Electric in Germany. And yeah, actually the fields which we are engaged in, it's all about electrical and electronic solutions with the focus to create a sustainable future. So I liked what you have presented on your slides, Lukas. Before you said the world is burning, and I would agree on that, and we have to fix it. And one way to fix it, that is to become more energy-wise, in particular in using electrical energy, and that is what we are engaged in, and that starts from household appliances, and it goes to satellite technique, and one particular focus which is of importance for us in those days, it's the heat pump technology, and I think we will later on touch about that, but it's also covering semiconductor devices, solutions for e-mobility and things like that.
All right. And Naveed, now your turn. I would like to discuss a little bit more about the young workforce in Pakistan of around 22 years old, right, as the data you shared. And how do you think this can have a big impact on the green energy revolution back in Pakistan?
Right, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me. So let me just start by telling about myself. I am actually an academic, a career academic until the last, 16 years. But a few years ago, I became accidentally an entrepreneur. So you'll probably have heard this for the first time, that somebody can become accidentally an entrepreneur. But now I am into it, so I'm really enjoying it, and I'm wholeheartedly working towards. So I represent the NeuBolt Energy Services, currently co-founded by one of my co-founders, Naman, who is also in the audience. So Pakistan is a very interesting market. It is the 5th largest country in terms of population. We just had our census completed like last week, and now we are about 250 million people. The interesting part is 22% of half of this workforce is less than 22 years old, which means that in the next 25 years' time, of course, we are going to have a really young workforce that is coming up. And in terms of energy, of course, our needs are growing rapidly because of the country's goal for industrialization and others. And of course, just the normal usage, it is growing rapidly. So another thing that Pakistan has is that it has been depending a lot on natural gas reserves. Now we don't have that much to feed this much population or this much industry. So we have a twin problem. Not only that we need to reduce our emissions, we also need to provide more energy sources for the people. But here I would like to tell you something different about Pakistan which many other countries don't have. So when you are working in a country like Pakistan, which is about 97% the people follow the Muslim faith, you cannot go there with the traditional business models. So a business model can be that somebody can just you put out loans and maybe at very few percentage of interest. Guess what? In Pakistan, people are not going to take them because in the Muslim faith, they cannot take a loan on even 0.01% interest. So you have to come up with very different business models which can actually sustain that energy transition. First of all, it will convince the people to go into it. And second, it should sustain them into that energy transition. One thing that we believe that can really work in our favor is the energy efficiency capability. So while we are talking about the generation side of things, energy efficiency also brings a lot of, you can say, opportunities that are somehow missed because energy efficiency, creating a business model is much difficult than creating in a generation technology. So I think if we do, and then of course there are many people who are living under $5 a day. So you have to come up, and the government does not have money for subsidies. So all these challenges combined together makes it a very different market. So from our own startup, we have tried to solve this problem through some innovative business models, and hopefully it's working. So I think that's where I stop and let others speak, and then I can come back. Thank you.
All right. And now, woman power, Lakimini. I would like to know more a little bit about the role of startups and smaller companies, since Naveed already started talking about entrepreneurship and also the role of the private sector in Pakistan. So what about Sri Lanka? Could you share with us?
Thank you so much. So, I'm Lakimini Wijesundera. So I'm actually an entrepreneur as well, and so I'm involved in several startups which relate to ESG and climate change related technology from a software perspective. So from a Sri Lanka perspective, actually, just historically, we were almost fully renewable with hydro. But then, as Naveed mentioned, the capacity and the requirement increases, especially over time with all these devices and consumption that we require. So therefore, also with climate change, the hydro, the capacities and the climate changes also affected the hydro. So therefore, from about almost near 100% of renewable, we've dropped to 50% or a little under 50%. That's just in the rainy season. And then we have to depend on fossil, mainly coal. So along with that, the country itself, the government has looked at many projects like wind, solar, and things like that. And when it comes to solar, really there was this intention to get the people involved. So let's say starting out with 100, so we're a population of 22 million compared to the 250 that Naveed has in Pakistan. But still, so the intention initially, this was about 10 years back, there was an intention of going for 100,000 households with solar so that they would invest and they would also be able to give it back to the grid. But the dynamics, the financial dynamics really don't work because we still do have subsidy and most households, the smaller households just pay something like $35 to $50 a month, and paying for $1,300, $2,000, just although it may sound not so big, it is big for those households. So in countries like Sri Lanka or in many countries in Asia, I believe the financials, as Naveed mentioned, they need to be looked at differently because it's not quite the same as any other country. So that's one, and you asked about the startup. So in terms of technology, there's a massive startup community being built up in Sri Lanka. There's a lot of technology like software talent. So there's 1,000 startup program that's almost getting filled up now. And we are also part of it. And there's a lot of moves, the ESG, so climate being one, and also a measurement. Also, I believe there were a couple of startups that presented, so things similar to that, where measurement and activation using technology is highly encouraged in Sri Lanka. So I'm glad to say that hopefully we can do a lot from the startup industry. So back to you, Dr.
All right, so I do believe that it is very important to have a multi-stakeholder approach, right, when we talk about green energy. So Lukas, how do you think that policies can enhance green energy, especially in cooperation between Asia and Europe in this regard?
I think, well, the IRA in the US showcased quite well how public policies can affect entire industries on a positive scheme and can basically shift investment focus towards a certain industry. And many countries in Asia are actually doing the same. Like India launching the production-linked incentive scheme, significantly subsidizing local production, vertical integration of production, etc. And this will indirectly affect Europe very, very intensively. So in a way that either Europe launches their own industrial subsidy program in order to keep and build up production capacities here in Europe, or they will shift their demands towards other Asian countries, for example, like India, but also Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Indonesia, and so on, who are all heavily pushing and subsidizing towards a local production, and those European companies will buy from there. So I think there is a very direct linkage between subsidies and industrial support programs, especially during a ramp-up period. And then at some point in time, after a certain ramp-up period, it needs to run itself, right? So currently in an unfair, an unlevel playing field where China is dominating a market like so significantly, as you saw before on the slides, for example, you need subsidy programs to build a more healthy portfolio mix. That's why the US launched the IRA and India launched the PLI scheme and so on. But for example, what the IRA is missing is a focus towards R&D. Yeah, in a sense that there's no incentive to basically build up a technology which is superior, or at least after those 10 years of the IRA can compete on a global scheme, right? So to your question, yes, you need global subsidies and industrial programs from a government perspective, but they need to be designed in a way that they are smart and that they are basically that they will actually achieve the desired outcomes.
Exactly. So for you, Andreas, do you think that we need Asia?
The answer is very simple. Yes, of course we need. And I think during our discussion here right now, and also during the morning, in almost all of the discussion, it was mentioned we need cooperation, we need collaboration. So we need each other's actually, and again, the challenges are huge. We have to find solutions for those challenges, and we can only do it together. So definitely we need each other's. The answer is a clear yes, and we need us in, let's say, for different aspects. On the one hand, we have built up in the past different technological solutions out of which we can now pick the best ones to apply. But even when we share the same solution basis, then the way such solutions are applied are different from region to region. And we need to learn from those experiences to create the best fitting solution for each case. So yes, we need each other's. And very briefly touching about the subsidy topic, I think, well, in a perfect world, maybe everything would be ruled by the market automatically. But sometimes a specific motivation is needed to overcome a certain period of time where the challenges are too huge and the concerns are too pressing, so that we cannot wait until the invisible hand is solving somehow. So we need this additional motivation. But I think this is maybe the most difficult area to structure this very, very wisely. And here we have to be very, very careful. It's mostly a topic to be solved in the political sphere. But also here we need to have the cooperation, the exchange of information between the academic sector, between the industry, including the innovative startups and the political sector, to trying to build the best fit in that area.
And Naveed, well, you just mentioned about academia, right? The role of academia as well. I think that the missing point of driving energy, transactions and policies is really to define the role of different stakeholders. And you, as a professor as well, maybe you could share the role of academia in all this topic.
Sure. So academia, of course, is playing a big role, and also can play an even bigger role. Let me tell you what is the challenge with academia, especially in our part of the world. So the government and even the multilateral agencies, bilateral agencies, dole out a lot of money in terms of uplifting the universities. So that's good, and that should continue to happen. But the problem happens when so these technology readiness level 1 through 9, there is a valley of death that comes at level number 2 or 3, I believe, where you don't have funding for R&D and the product is not ready for commercialization or commercially ready solutions. I would say about 80% of very good ideas that have done some work, some kind of basic lab prototyping, just drop that cliff. They do not go. I think that gap needs to be filled. The second thing is that in terms of startups or the companies that are coming out of universities, the local context, of course, they have the local context, but they don't have the technology advancement that of course, is required. That connection can be built with, for example, Berlin, with other cities, where some SMEs can have that technological advantage, and they can connect with academia and the startups coming out of the developing world. Look, because the climate change problem is, you can say, at its apex in the countries like Pakistan. So if the world's temperature increased by 1 centigrade, the temperature in our part of the world increased by 2 centigrade. Already we have seen flood-like situation. Last year, I mean, almost 400 times more rain happened in some areas of Pakistan. I am from a region where there's a lots of mango orchard, very famous for mangoes. This year, almost all the crop were destroyed by hailstorms, which I never heard in my lifetime. So all those challenges, of course, are intensified in our part of the world. And not only we have to do energy transition, we have to deal with all the other adaptation challenges also. And we did a survey and found out that energy poverty is one common problem across the region where we went, whether it's in a place where there's an agriculture farm or somebody who's displaced by floods. So I think not only we have to find solution in normal times, we need to find solution in times that are not so normal.
Yeah, and from the Sri Lanka perspective, Lakimini, do you have any work experience in neighboring countries or other regions that Sri Lanka is perhaps learning from or cooperating with in terms of green energy?
Actually, yes. So the wind energy program that has been started, there is intention to work with India. I believe there's already cooperation going on. So the government has, in fact, looked at climate and even sort of looked at it being a climate hub, and a very serious look at it. There's been a climate summit recently as well. So there's a lot of focus from a Sri Lanka perspective, and we are a small country, 22 million people. In order to make an impact to the world in this aspect, we have to work with and cooperate with other parties. And India, of course, is always a friendly state to us. We've got lots of historic ties as well. And I believe there's a lot of politically and in terms of discussions going on. I believe, especially the wind and that hydrogen-related clean energy, there is. It's in news quite a bit now these days, and I believe that's one of the things that I'd like to mention. That's on the energy per se, but if you talk about the technology, which is also an area that Sri Lanka is, has quite a lot of talent in. We do serve many countries around in the Southeast Asian region, India being one, and several others, even Bangladesh and other places. So the technologies that I was just speaking about earlier, it's more about the measurement and making sure the stakeholders who make a decision on investing or not investing, or not thinking whether it's important today or just leave it out for later, that's really important, because as much as subsidies and everything, the investment coming in for this technology has an impact. And if the powerful companies and the government entities, the decision makers are unaware of the measurement towards the goals, because the countries have set these goals like 2030, we're going to be as a as a global entity, we're going to be at least 50% of the emissions. I mean, that's like a bold, it's not too far away really. And then 2050 will be like completely zeroed. And that really means all these countries, including especially in Asia, have to be there. So that's quite a tall order. So India and some of the large entities like you said, Pakistan, we all have to be there. So, so the answer is yes. We are very much creating technology. Some of it's piloted in Sri Lanka, but really even the startup community that we have in Sri Lanka, looking at a broader global usage. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thank you. And from the Enpal perspective, you just mentioned today that you are looking for investment, right, to grow the company. Could you explain a little bit about the visions and the strategy that you want to adopt at Enpal regarding energy transaction, for instance?
Yeah, well, hopefully we'll never need money anymore. We had to raise some money to get there, but we are luckily profitable by now. Well, the big vision, as also mentioned before, is that we want to create the biggest renewable energy community on Earth. And the way how to get there, and I really want to stress Lakimini's point, which she made before, is by providing a product which is literally a no-brainer solution for everyone, and everybody can afford it. Yeah? So what you said before, you need incentives and you need to kind of have it accessible, and that's why we created in the beginning a rent product. Yeah, so we started with selling PV systems, and then we realized, okay, we have problems to scale. Because 90% of the customers told us, hey, I would love to get a PV system, but I cannot afford it. So we created a 20-year rent product for our customers where they can pay on a monthly basis a certain fee, which then they suddenly can afford, and they can basically switch their entire home to renewable energy products based on PV, battery, EV charging. Now we also launched a heat pump into our offering, and we'll also integrate an electric vehicle very soon in our end-to-end offering. And then suddenly a customer has an entire home which is built on renewables, but at the same time is saving money. Yeah. So our rent price they are paying to us is cheaper than what they are currently paying for traditional heating, traditional fuel for their cars, and for the electricity from the grid. Yeah? And only because of that fact we can scale so rapidly. Yeah? And if that's not the case, it's very difficult to kind of rapidly grow and achieve a renewable energy transition across the globe. And I think that's something Asia also needs to achieve. And in Germany, we achieved that by providing subsidies in the beginning, in 2010 and so on. The feed-in tariffs were highly subsidized. And basically costs dropped significantly. I think they dropped 80% or so within the last 10 to 15 years. And suddenly solar is the cheapest source of energy on Earth. And now you just need to create a no-brainer product around it in order to achieve a renewable energy transition. And that's our vision, and that's what we want to do. And we want to create a bright future.
So first, I think the main step is policies, right? It is important to have governments to acknowledge the need of new, technologies or finance mechanism to implement, to awareness for people also to start switching from traditional energy sources to green energy, right? And like you mentioned, I think cost. If cost is relatively lower, it is an extra incentive for us as consumers to switch from the traditional to a more green energy type of sources like solar panels.
Maybe one very brief addition to this. Yes, cost can be one driver, but another, I don't care about the motivation why a country wants to push solar, for example. India, for example, not only wants to push to decrease cost, they want to push PV to decrease cost, but also to save the grid from basically cutting off and so on, right? So you need to have decentralized energy, and that's a similarly good motivation to switch to renewables. And this can differ between the different countries, and it's okay. All pay into the right direction.
Exactly. Well, we also have some gaps between at least the developing countries, right? The developing countries and a country like Germany that we always need to tackle. Right, Andreas?
Yes, you are perfectly right. And if I would give an example where, in particular in Germany, we need to tackle that sector, that is the building sector, actually. So approximately 1/3 of the total energy consumption in Germany, it's in the building sector. It's in particular for heating, space heating, for providing hot water. And out of this energy consumption, still nowadays, approximately 80% it's met by fossil fuels.
80%. Wow,
it's 80.
Yeah.
It's still very, very high.
Yeah,
So
very high.
an enormous volume of greenhouse gas emissions, it's caused by that. So if we want to become climate neutral until 2045, we have to work on that sector, and you are working on that sector quite strongly. And also you have mentioned about one technology. There are several technologies, but one very important technology which is helping to become climate neutral in that area, that is the heat pump technology, because by this we can theoretically become completely climate neutral in respect of heating, hot water supplies, and also cooling, which is also in our region more and more of importance. And this is another area where a cooperation between Asia and Europe can be very beneficial, because Asia, and I'm now talking about the experiences in Japan in particular, they have an advantage in using the heat pump technology, and we can benefit from those technological advantages and experience advantages. And that is one aspect I would like to mention here, because probably heat pump is one of the most used words in the recent discussion.
It's a trend, right? In the market somehow?
It's a trend. It's a trend. It's a very important trend, I would say. And also when talking about the discussion about the Building Energy Act, it's sometimes a bit controversially discussed. And I believe that is because the heat pump technology, in the variety of its application areas, it's sometimes not completely understood. We are not only talking about air-to-water heat pump solutions. There is a much wider variety, and yes, I think it can be very beneficial to focus on that.
All right. So my last question is about what are the key drivers for businesses and industries to invest in green energy for Naveed and Lakimini?
Right. So I think we can divide the companies in two different aspects. One is, of course, the established companies. I think if a buyer from Germany or from Europe says that, okay, I would like your company to have less emissions, of course, that will drive their innovation. And of course, they will require innovation, and that will help the local startup ecosystem. I think for other areas of the economy, of course, policy is important. Policy is important, but policy without implementation is just a piece of paper. So I think in our part of the world, at least in Pakistan, I think the policies, it's easy to develop policies, but implementing them is a problem. Another thing is that we need to realize that unlike in a software world, where I come from and Lukas also invests in that area, hardware tech has to follow the law of physics. So you cannot, I mean, we cannot put solar panels every building in 5 years' time. It will take time. I think it's the behavior also that needs to change. If I can reduce my energy consumption, that can actually help a lot. So I think the companies can go in that level, tell their consumers, tell their customers, suppliers that, okay, you need to do better practices and do an awareness campaigns around that. So I think we need to probably do a multi-pronged approach in order to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, and policies that are targeted to, the conditions, the context of the each country, right, the economy. Lakimini?
Yes, thank you. So, talking about policies, in fact, I think already, I believe the EU has started, and even Germany, I believe, has for supply chain. So this automatically sort of makes Asian and the suppliers pretty much need to comply, otherwise they cannot be qualified to be vendors. So that's just flowing through. That's one area. And of course, another area I just want to mention, it's a little unique to us, where the ranking, again, this is going back to measurement, the ranking, it's complex, but with all the technologies that have come up, like the artificial intelligence and some of the other areas to speed up, a lot of information that is out there, like very wide information to be taken in and in a timely manner given to those who have to take those decisions. And it's an area that I'm personally, actually we are embarking on it. This is not just for Sri Lanka, but it's really for India, where the investors, even retail investors, to kind of see a good glimpse of those companies that are emission-free or less emission, and not just that, really it's more widely a ESG, but certainly on an emission-based. So it to strike retail users, normal people, as well as chairman and decision makers of companies, to see that kind of information so that the investment can come in and they can make a decision if that interest is there. So those are the 2 points I'd like to mention. Thanks.
Yeah, very good. I think the message is very clear. We can establish better cooperation, strategic cooperation, right? This is the right term now that the European Union is using for Asian countries. And to enhance this cooperation in key sectors, being energy and green energy, one of the main of these key topics for the agenda. Right, and well, thank you very much for your participation. Also, I quite enjoyed learning a little bit more about Pakistan, about Sri Lanka, about China, Japan, all of this perspective, and to understand more about opportunities, not only in the energy sector per se. You do have this green energy revolution across sectors. Well, e-commerce, you have construction, right, IT industries, but it's very important to understand that we are not alone, we need each other, we need to think of policies, we need to think of subsidies, awareness, etc. Thank you all.
Thank you.